If you've ever wondered what betrayal really sounds like, let me tell you something honest. It's not the shouting, not the smashed plates, not the slammed doors people talk about. No, it's quieter, much quieter. For me, it began with the soft click of our front door at 10:30 on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday night in Oxford. A sound I'd heard thousands of times before, but that evening, it felt different, heavy, measured, almost rehearsed. My name is Helen Carter, 38. English teacher, wife of 12 years, lover of quiet mornings and proper tea. And until that Tuesday, I genuinely believed my life was steady, maybe not thrilling, maybe not extraordinary, but stable, safe. But safety is a strange thing. Sometimes it's not protection, it's denial wearing a warm cardigan. I remember standing in our kitchen, the smell of shepherd's pie still lingering in the air, waiting for Andrew to come in and say, "Long day, love?" the way he always used to. But he didn't. He walked past me, past the dining table, past the soft glow of the lamp we chose together in Brighton, with a smile on his face I hadn't seen in years, a smile that wasn't for me. I didn't confront him. I didn't question him, because deep down, some part of me knew. You don't smile like that walking into a home where your wife is waiting. You smile like that when you've just been with someone who makes you feel alive in a way you no longer expect from your own marriage. And if you're watching this, if you've ever felt that cold, sinking certainty in your stomach, stay with me. Because what came next didn't just break my marriage. It broke open the version of myself I had been protecting for far too long. Before I tell you the truth, before I show you the night everything cracked wide open, tell me in the comments, ***. Have you ever felt the moment your relationship changed, even if no one said a word? ***. If I had to pinpoint the exact moment my marriage shifted from something feels off to I can't unknow this, it happened the very next morning. I wish I could tell you I confronted Andrew straight away. I didn't. Real life doesn't work like the films, where the betrayed wife throws wine, slams doors, demands answers. Sometimes real heartbreak is quieter, more observant. It studies before it strikes. That Wednesday morning, Oxford was wrapped in a damp, silvery mist. Andrew sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone while sipping coffee, acting as though nothing in the world had shifted. But times had. And something about the way he smiled faintly at his screen, a smile that didn't belong to me, confirmed everything I'd feared the night before. "Sleep all right?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah." "Exhausted though," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Big presentation today, might be home late." Another lie, dressed as routine. And I swallowed it, letting it pass as if it didn't scrape the inside of my chest. He kissed the top of my head before leaving for work, a gesture that felt suddenly foreign, like a scripted line delivered by the wrong actor. The door clicked shut, and with it, the Helen the First had been for 12 years left too. I cleared the mugs, wiped the counters, opened the curtains, and then I stood perfectly still in the center of the kitchen, listening to the silence Andrew left behind. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was accusatory. I needed clarity. Answers. Proof beyond a smile at the wrong moment. And sometimes, life hands you the very thing you're afraid to look at. At 9:30, his smartwatch left charging beside the toaster lit up again. ***, Melissa. Good luck today. You'll smash it. I'll be thinking of you. XX, ***. The two little kisses at the end weren't even subtle. My stomach twisted, but my hands were steady. Much steadier than they should have been. I opened his messages. Not out of impulse this time, but intention. And what I found wasn't a fling, not a drunken mistake, not a moment of weakness. It was architecture. A fully furnished emotional affair, with foundations, walls, ceilings, a home he had built with another woman while I waited in this one, believing I was his safe place. They had routines, shared jokes, a favorite spot by the river, even a playlist titled **** for us, ***. I scrolled until the words blurred. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. long enough for the tea in my cup to go cold. And then a thought arrived, quiet, unwelcome, but honest. Asterisk, asterisk, he's already left you. He just hasn't packed his suitcase yet. Asterisk, asterisk. Most people think the hardest part of being betrayed is the moment of discovery. It isn't. The hardest part is realizing how long you've been living with half hugs, distracted conversations, and a partner who looked at you the way someone looks at an old coat. Useful, familiar, but not exciting. I opened my laptop, typed Melissa's name into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Her face appeared instantly, blonde hair, bright smile, motivational quotes, photos from team lunches where Andrew sat 2 chairs away, but leaning toward her. And this is the part no one warns you about. Finding out someone betrayed you is painful, yes. But seeing the face they chose over you, that pain sits in a different part of the body. Lower, heavier, more humiliating. Melissa Harding, 29. Marketing assistant. Fond of red wine, spin classes, motivational podcasts. Married. Married? That detail snagged my attention like a thorn. Her profile photo showed her on a beach in Cornwall, arms wrapped around a tall, dark-haired man with kind eyes. Asterisk, asterisk. Oliver Harding, solicitor. Asterisk, asterisk. And suddenly, something sharp inside me clicked into place. If Andrew had walked away from me emotionally, then surely Melissa had done the same to Oliver. 2 unsuspecting partners living parallel heartbreaks without knowing each other existed. But we existed, we mattered, and we deserved to know. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to stop being a secret, buried between 2 lovers who had no right keeping it. I spent the rest of the morning pacing through the house, touching objects that now felt like props from a theatre play I never auditioned for. The wedding photo on the mantelpiece, the mug he painted for me on our first anniversary, the half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the dining table. All lies, wrapped in sentimentality. By noon I was sitting on the sofa, laptop open, cursor blinking, staring at Oliver's professional profile. He looked trustworthy, steady, the kind of man who irons on Sundays and believes in mutual respect. A man who didn't deserve a wife who kissed another man outside the office in a car park. Yes, I found that photo too. I wanted to call him, to say, "You don't know me, but we share a heartbreak." But that would sound hysterical, desperate, unhinged. And the one thing I refused to be was unhinged. No. If I was going to speak to Oliver Harding, it had to be done with dignity, with a calmness Andrew no longer associated with me. A calmness he mistook for weakness. I closed the laptop, made tea, sat at the kitchen table and let the steam rise against my face. Then, slowly, carefully, deliberately, I began planning. Not revenge, not chaos. Asterisk, asterisk. Clarity, exposure, truth delivered at the right moment, when it would land exactly where it needed to. Asterisk, asterisk. Not to destroy Andrew, but to stop protecting him. If you're still with me, tell me in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk, would you have told the husband, or kept the secret to protect yourself from more pain? Asterisk, asterisk. What I did next changed everything. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd one day sit at my own kitchen table, planning how to expose the man I married, I would have laughed softly, politely, the way women are taught to. But there I was, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside me, a stack of marking I couldn't face, and the overwhelming realization that my marriage had already ended, long before I ever found Melissa's messages. The thing about heartbreak is this: it isn't loud. It doesn't come crashing through the door like a storm. It seeps in, quietly, like rainwater through an unnoticed crack in the ceiling, until one day you look up and realize the whole thing is swollen and warped and beyond repair. That Wednesday afternoon, I finally stopped pretending. I closed my eyes and pictured Andrew. The way he had once looked at me on our wedding day outside the registry office in Oxford, tie crooked, hands shaking as he promised a life built on trust. Where had that man gone? How long ago had he walked out of our marriage emotionally? How had I missed it? Because love is blinding. Yes. But routine is even worse. We had slipped into a life where we moved around each other like gentle ghosts, polite, functional, predictable. I cooked. He worked. We watched telly but never the same program. We slept beside each other but never touched. Somewhere along the line, Andrew stopped asking how my day was. And somewhere along the line, I stopped noticing. Until Melissa. Until the messages. The photos. The playlist. The jokes. The kisses typed in 2 tiny letters, XX. I used to think affairs destroyed people because of sex. But now I know the truth. It's the intimacy that breaks you. The conversations meant for you that someone else is having. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. I spent hours thinking through what to do. Confront him? He'd deny it. He was good at denying things. Call Melissa? Humiliating myself to a woman who already thought she had more of Andrew than I did? Never. Tell Oliver? Tempting. Sharp. Satisfying in a way I couldn't yet admit. But reckless. No. I needed a plan that protected my dignity, not one that made me look desperate. I opened Andrew's synced Google Calendar again. Friday, 7:30 p.m. Asterisk, asterisk. Dinner, the Watermill. Request corner booth. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at those words until they blurred into shapes. The Watermill. A place he and I had always said we'd go when things quietened down. A place I had circled in a magazine once, showing him the picture of a river-lit terrace, and he had kissed my forehead and said, "Soon, love." Soon never came, but it came for Melissa. The betrayal wasn't the restaurant. It was Andrew using our shared dreams to court someone else. That's when something inside me hardened. Not anger, clarity. If Andrew wanted a secret dinner with Melissa at a restaurant I loved, then perhaps the truth should walk into that same restaurant, not wearing rage, but wearing grace. I typed Oliver's name again, reading every detail carefully. Solicitor, mid-30s, volunteering at a legal aid charity, keen runner, married, a good man living in a lie he didn't deserve. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I drafted an email. Asterisk, asterisk. Dear Mr. Harding, I'm writing from St. Aldwyn's Secondary School, Oxford. Asterisk, asterisk. I paused. Was this cruel? Was I dragging another innocent person into my heartbreak? Then I remembered Melissa's message. I'll be thinking of you. XX. No, I wasn't creating the heartbreak. I was simply uncovering it. I continued typing. We would be honored if you could meet me this Friday at 7 p.m. at the Watermill to discuss speaking opportunities. A perfectly normal request from a teacher. Nothing suspicious, nothing dramatic, just a precise alignment of timing. I reread the email 5 times. It looked professional, calm, measured, rational, completely unlike the way my heart felt when I pressed send. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then my laptop pinged. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you for reaching out, Mrs. Carter. Friday works well for me. Looking forward to meeting. Asterisk, asterisk. My breath caught. It was done. Set in motion. 2 broken truths were heading toward the same room, and I wasn't sure whether I was terrified or relieved. For the first time in months, I stood up straighter, not because I felt powerful, but because I felt awake. Strange how betrayal does that. It breaks you open. And suddenly the world looks too bright, too sharp, too painfully honest. That evening, I cooked dinner without tasting a thing. Andrew texted me, asterisk, asterisk, late again. Order takeaway if you're hungry. Asterisk, asterisk. The audacity of someone who believed you'd never leave them is breathtaking. I washed the dishes slowly, listening to the quiet drip of water from the tap. Everything familiar suddenly felt wrong. The fridge magnets from trips we never enjoyed. The worn tea towel he always said we should replace. The mismatched bowls we bought during our adventurous phase. I realized then, we hadn't been husband and wife for a very long time. We had been flatmates with a shared surname. And yet, I felt guilty. Horribly guilty. Was I betraying him now, too? By planning this meeting with Oliver? By inviting the truth out of the shadows? But then I remembered something my mum used to say. Asterisk, asterisk. Silence protects the wrong people. Asterisk, asterisk. Andrew had benefited from my silence for too long. If you're still listening, tell me honestly. Asterisk, asterisk. Have you ever kept quiet just to avoid breaking a truth you already knew was shattered? Asterisk, asterisk. Your answer might help someone else reading the comments realize they're not alone. When Andrew finally walked through the door that night, I watched him carefully, his cheeks flushed, his tie slightly crooked in a way that felt deliberate, as though someone else had straightened it earlier. He kissed my cheek without looking into my eyes. "Presentation went well," he said. "I'm sure it did." He didn't notice my tone. He never did. He went upstairs to shower, humming. Yes, humming. And for the first time in years, the sound didn't comfort me. It repelled me. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped together, feeling something unfamiliar rising in my chest. Strength, not anger, not revenge. Strength. Because once you know the truth, even if you're not ready to say it aloud, you can never return to who you were before. And by Friday at 7 p.m., everything would be different. For all of us. There are days in a woman's life she can never forget. Weddings, births, losses. And then there are the days she is reborn. For me, that day was Friday. The day truth decided it was tired of waiting. All morning my chest felt tight, like something was being wound inside me. A clock, a wire, a storm about to break. I moved through the house like someone wearing a body that didn't belong to them. I washed my hair, folded laundry, stared at a wall for 10 minutes without realizing. Every ordinary act felt like it belonged to someone else, someone still living in a life I was halfway out of. By late afternoon, the sky over Oxford had turned the colour of old silver. A cold breeze slipped through the cracks of the window frame, brushing against my arms like a warning. I stood in front of the wardrobe, staring at rows of clothes that no longer felt like times me asterisk. Clothes chosen for parents' evenings, anniversary dinners, Christmas lunches. A history stitched into fabric. After 10 minutes, I pulled out a simple navy dress. The one Andrew once said made me look too serious. Tonight, seriousness was exactly what I needed. I tied my hair loosely, put on subtle gold earrings, and looked into the mirror for longer than I expected. I didn't look broken. I looked clear, almost frighteningly clear. There is a kind of calm that comes to people standing on the edge of something irreversible, and I felt it now. Before leaving the house, I paused at the kitchen table, my fingers brushing the wood where Andrew and I once drank tea every morning. I used to believe these little routines were the glue of a marriage. Now I wondered whether they had only masked the cracks. The cab ride to the Watermill was painfully quiet. The city moved around me, cyclists rushing past, students spilling out of cafes, students laughing in that carefree way I once knew. But inside the cab, everything felt suspended. Time had manners that evening. When the car pulled up outside the restaurant, the lamps along the river flickered softly in the wind, casting gold ripples over the water. It was beautiful. It hurt. I stepped inside. The warm light, soft music, clinking cutlery, all the romance Andrew had reserved for someone else. A waiter approached with a polite smile. "Booking under Carter?" "Yes," I said, steadying myself. "Table for two." He led me to a window table, a view overlooking the river where the lamplight danced. The kind of view you save for someone special. My hands trembled slightly as I sat, though I clasped them together under the table so no one would notice. At exactly 6:58 p.m., a man approached my table, tall, dark-haired, a little tired around the eyes, but gentle-looking, as if the world hadn't quite hardened him yet. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Yes." "Oliver Harding?" He nodded. "Pleasure to meet you. Sorry if I'm a bit early." "You're right on time," I said. We shook hands, professionally, politely, two strangers about to step into the same fire. He sat across from me and placed his notebook on the table. "I've always wanted to speak at a school, happy to help." His smile was warm. It made everything I was about to do feel cruel. But I reminded myself, asterisk, I did not put him in this situation. Melissa did. Asterisk. and Andrew. We began talking, or rather, he talked, and I nodded at the right moments. Urban planning, legal frameworks, young people's future opportunities. All the while, my heartbeat drowned out half his words. At 7:11 p.m., something shifted in the restaurant. The door opened. A familiar laugh slipped through the warm air like a blade. Andrew. My stomach clenched so tightly I had to grip the napkin to steady myself. He walked toward the far tables, and beside him, Melissa, wearing a fitted red dress, her hand grazing his arm as she whispered something that made him smile like a man falling in love for the first time. I watched his face, the softness, the attention, the spark he hadn't shown me in years, and it didn't break me. It freed me, because in that moment I understood one thing. I had not lost Andrew. He had left. I lowered my gaze quickly before Oliver noticed anything odd. But Andrew saw me. Our eyes locked across the room. He froze mid-step. The colour drained from his cheeks. Melissa followed his gaze, and the way her smile collapsed into panic was almost theatrical. Oliver glanced behind him. "What's happening?" I took a breath. This was the moment the truth had been walking toward. "Oliver," I said quietly, "there's something you need to see." He turned fully, just as Andrew's hand dropped away from Melissa's. Confusion flickered across his features. Then something darker, fear, maybe began to bloom. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but the floor held me. I walked toward Andrew, meeting him halfway. His breaths were shallow, his eyes wide with pleading. "Helen, please." "Not here," I said. But my voice wasn't a whisper. It carried. Melissa stumbled up behind him. "Helen, it's not—" "Stop," I said gently. "You don't owe me excuses. You owe them to your husband." The restaurant went silent, the kind of silence that thickens the air. Oliver approached slowly, as if afraid of what he already knew. I looked at him carefully, not with pity, but with recognition. "Oliver," I said softly, "this is my husband, Andrew, and that is your wife." His expression crumpled, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everything in his eyes said enough. Melissa burst into tears. Andrew tried to grab my arm. "Helen, please, let's go somewhere private." "No," I said. "Truth doesn't need privacy. Lies do. If you were in my place, ***, would you have exposed them right there, or walked away quietly with your dignity? ***. Tell me honestly, your answer might surprise someone reading this." A manager hurried over, whispering something about moving us somewhere discreet. I nodded, because the worst was done. The truth was out. And whatever happened next would happen on my terms. We were escorted into a private room. 4 chairs, 1 table, soft lighting that felt almost too kind for what it was about to witness. I sat down first, Oliver beside me, Andrew and Melissa across from us, looking like schoolchildren about to fail the easiest test life had ever given them. No one spoke. Not until I did. "Let's begin." There is a kind of silence only betrayal can create. A silence so heavy it presses against your lungs, making every breath feel borrowed. That was the silence filling the private dining room. 4 chairs, 1 table, 2 marriages lying broken between us. I folded my hands in my lap. My heartbeat felt strangely steady, as if my body had decided it was done panicking. Across the table, Melissa sat with her shoulders curled inward, mascara smudged under her eyes. Andrew kept rubbing the back of his neck, his nervous habit. But tonight, it didn't soften him. It made him look small. Oliver sat beside me, rigid, staring at the polished wood of the table, as though the truth might be carved into it if he just looked hard enough. Finally, Andrew spoke. "Helen," he said, voice cracking, "I don't even know where to start." "Start," I replied quietly. "At the beginning. When did it stop being just us?" He winced, and Melissa covered her face with trembling hands. Andrew swallowed. "It wasn't meant to happen. We only talked at first. Just harmless conversations." Oliver let out a short, humorless laugh. "Harmless? My wife has been talking with your husband in hotels." "Apparently." Melissa burst into tears again. Oliver, please, I never meant to hurt you. I felt lonely, lost. You were always working late. I was working for Times Us, * Melissa. His voice didn't rise, but something in it broke. I turned my eyes back to Andrew. And you? My voice stayed calm, almost too calm, a calmness that frightened him more than anger ever could. When did you decide I wasn't enough anymore? Andrew leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. Helen, it wasn't about you. I never stopped caring for you. I felt invisible at home. We drifted, and she listened. I nodded slowly. There it is, I said softly. The sentence every betrayed spouse hears. It wasn't you. We drifted. She listened. Never. I chose this. I broke what we built. I lied. He looked up, eyes glossy. I'm sorry. Sorry, I repeated, tasting the word. Do you know what sorry means in this context, Andrew? It means you regret being caught, not the actions. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Melissa finally lifted her head. Helen, I know you must hate me. I would hate me. But I didn't go looking for this. Andrew, he was kind. He understood me. It just happened. It just happened, I asked gently. Affairs don't just happen. You book dinners. You send messages. You hide things. You share inside jokes. You make space for someone else in the time that belongs to your partner. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It simply delivered the truth. Oliver leaned forward, looking directly at his wife. Melissa, did you ever plan to tell me? Did you ever think about what you were risking? My trust, our family, our home? She shook her head miserably. I thought it would end on its own. That, he said quietly, might be the cruelest lie of all. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of consequences sat at the table with us, uninvited but unavoidable. I looked at Andrew again. I read every message, I said softly. Every word, every photo from your little outings. The lunch by the river. The jokes about me being too sensible, too careful, too predictable. Even the playlist. He shut his eyes, shame rippling through his body. I was angry at first, I continued. Then I was humiliated. Then I grieved. I paused. And then I realized something. You haven't chosen me in a very long time. He reached for my hand across the table, but I moved mine away. Oliver cleared his throat. Helen, what do you want to do? I mean, what happens now? What a simple question. What an impossible answer. I inhaled. What I want now, I said, is honesty. I looked at Andrew. Will you stop seeing her? He nodded instantly. Yes, I'll end it. Tonight. Right now. I'll do anything to fix this. Melissa gasped softly, as though she'd forgotten a choice had to be made. But I shook my head. No, Andrew. Not because I asked. Because you should have chosen that long before this moment. And the fact that you didn't is already the answer. His face fell. Oliver spoke next, voice low but steady. Melissa, do you want to fix us? She hesitated. The hesitation was the answer. He exhaled slowly. Right. He leaned back, understanding settling over him like winter frost. Melissa opened her mouth as if to explain, but nothing came out. For the first time since entering the room, I felt something inside me loosen. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Closure. A soft, final click of a door that had been half open for too long. I stood up. I'm leaving tonight, I said. I've booked a hotel. I'll come home on Monday for my things. Andrew looked stricken. Helen, please, don't do this. We can talk. We times are times talking, I replied. This is the conversation. This is clarity. He reached out, but I stepped back. You had months to choose me. You didn't. So now I choose myself. Melissa wiped her cheeks, whispering, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But her apology felt like rain on stone. It changed nothing. Oliver stood too, buttoning his jacket with shaky hands. Helen, he said quietly, if you ever need someone who understands this, I'm here. I met his eyes, the eyes of someone who had been wounded in the same shape. Thank you, A knock at the door made us all turn. The waiter waited outside, asking if we needed anything else. "No," I said gently. "We're finished. If you're still watching this, tell me. Asterisk, asterisk. Do you think leaving immediately is strength? Or should a marriage be fought for even after betrayal? Asterisk, asterisk. There's no right answer. But your answer might help someone who is standing where I once stood." As I walked out of the private room, Andrew reached for me one last time. "Helen, please, don't go." I stopped in the doorway. My voice was soft, but unshakable. "I didn't go, Andrew." "You did. I'm just finally catching up." Then I walked out, and I didn't look back. Some nights don't feel like nights at all. They feel like long, stretched out moments. Moments suspended between who you were and who you are about to become. The night I walked out of the Watermill was exactly that. As soon as the door closed behind me, Oxford's cold night air wrapped around my shoulders, sharp, bracing, almost cleansing. I stood there for a moment, hearing nothing but my own breathing, the faint rustle of leaves, and the distant hum of passing cars. Behind that door, two people who once believed they controlled the narrative were left to sit with the consequences of their choices. But out here, the story was finally mine again. I walked down the path, my heels tapping against the cobblestones. Each step felt like an echo of the woman I used to be. Someone who waited, overlooked red flags, made excuses for someone who stopped choosing her long before she ever knew it. I didn't cry. Not yet. Tears belonged to shock, to disbelief. But I had passed disbelief hours ago. Outside the restaurant, the taxi rank was empty. So I walked, not because I had anywhere specific to go, but because I needed to feel the night around me. The cold, the quiet, the newness of beginning again, even while everything still hurt. By the time I reached the Celeste Hotel, my fingers were numb, but my mind felt painfully alive. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. "Good evening. Checking in?" "Yes," I whispered. "Helen Carter, room 1205. She handed me a key card, unaware that the woman standing in front of her had just walked away from a life she spent 12 years building, unaware that every belonging in the suitcase I carried felt suddenly foreign. The lift ride was silent. On the 12th floor, I stepped into a long, carpeted hallway, where each soft footstep sounded like a small decision. Inside the room, I locked the door immediately, not because I was afraid Andrew would come, but because I needed the world shut out. The room was modern and tidy, a king-sized bed, a desk by the window, and soft amber lighting that made everything look gentler than it felt inside my chest. I set my suitcase down, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. And then, only then, the tears came. Not pretty tears, not cinematic or graceful, but jagged, shaking sobs that seemed to rip through my chest, as if they had been waiting years to escape. I pressed my palms to my eyes, but it didn't stop. The grief came in waves. Grief for the woman I had been, for the marriage I'd tried so hard to save without knowing it was already gone, for every night Andrew came home late, and I believed him, for every hug that felt different, and I ignored it, for all the times I chose understanding when I should have chosen myself. I cried until my throat burned, until breathing felt like swallowing hot sand, until the tears ran dry. When the knock on the door came, I nearly jumped. 3 gentle taps. I froze. Surely Andrew hadn't followed me. He wasn't that brave, or that foolish. I stood, crossed the room, and looked through the peephole. Oliver. He stood in the hallway wearing a long coat, shoulders slightly hunched from the cold, and from the weight of everything he'd learned that night. I hesitated, my hand on the lock, not because I feared him, but because I wasn't sure I had any strength left to speak. Still, I opened the door a few inches. "Oliver? Hi," he breathed. I'm sorry to bother you." I didn't know where else to go. Something inside me softened, not romantically, but humanly. "Come in," I whispered. He stepped inside quietly, as though not wanting to disturb the room. We sat in the 2 armchairs by the window. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks, cars moving, people going about their lives, completely unaware that ours had been turned inside out. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Silence, for once, didn't feel like punishment. It felt like recognition. Finally, Oliver exhaled. I still can't wrap my head around it. His voice cracked slightly. I mean, how did they find the time? The lies, the planning, the audacity. I folded my hands together. I used to think people cheated because they were unhappy, but now I think they cheat because they're too weak to deal with the real-life consequences of their unhappiness. He nodded slowly. Yes, weakness. That's the right word. We sat quietly again, and then he looked at me with genuine curiosity. How did you stay so composed tonight? I thought you were going to fall apart, but you didn't. I let out a tired laugh. I didn't stay calm, Oliver. I just waited for the right moment. Some truths lose their power if shouted. They need to be delivered quietly, so the person hearing them can't pretend they missed it. He nodded, absorbing every word. You're stronger than you think, he said softly. The sentence lodged somewhere deep inside me. I hadn't felt strong in months. But tonight I had been clear. And clarity sometimes looks like strength from the outside. If you're still here, tell me in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk, have you ever felt stronger than you expected, only because life gave you no other choice? Asterisk, asterisk. Your story might help someone who feels alone right now. Oliver leaned back, rubbing his hands together. I don't know what I'm going to do, he admitted. Go home? Sleep on the sofa? Pretend for a night I'm fine? You don't have to pretend, I said gently. Not here. He gave a faint smile. Thank you for everything, for not letting me stay in the dark. I swallowed. I know how it feels. The darkness. He looked at me for a moment, really looked at me, as though seeing someone who understood the shape of his pain. Then he stood. I'll get another room, he said quietly. No pressure. Just, if you need a friend tonight, you know where I am. I nodded. Good night, Oliver. Good night, Helen. And I'm sorry we met this way. When he left, I walked to the window again. The city glowed with its usual indifference. Lights flickering, cars weaving through streets, life continuing as though mine hadn't just cracked open. But I wasn't broken. Not beyond repair. I was bruised, shaken, grieving, but also shifting, changing, rearranging myself into a woman who refused to be unseen again. As I crawled into bed, pulling the hotel sheets over my body, I whispered something into the quiet room that I hadn't said aloud in years. This is not the end. It's the beginning. And for the first time that night, I believed it. Some mornings arrive like a cold truth, quiet, uninvited, unavoidable. The morning after the confrontation was exactly that. Light seeped through the hotel curtains in a pale, forgiving shade of gold. I lay awake, long before the city stirred, staring at the ceiling, feeling the strange weightlessness that follows a collapse. Not freedom, not sadness, something in between, like standing on the riverbank after a storm, watching debris float by, realizing some of it had been part of your life for years. I reached for my phone. 8 missed calls from Andrew. 4 voicemails. 3 texts. Asterisk, asterisk, Andrew. Asterisk, asterisk. Asterisk, Helen, please. I can explain. Asterisk, asterisk. Please answer. I'm worried. Asterisk, asterisk. I'm at home. I don't know what to do. Asterisk. I let the screen go dark. His panic didn't move me. It simply confirmed what I'd known all along. Some men don't fear losing you. They fear losing the version of themselves you allowed them to pretend to be. I sat up, wrapped the hotel robe around me, and walked to the window. Oxford below looked unchanged. Still calm, still graceful, but I felt different. Raw, bruised, but strangely clear. My entire life with Andrew played in soft flashes. Sunday markets, Christmases at his mother's, the rainy weekend in Devon when he proposed. Moments I had once held close. But now? They felt like photographs left too long in the sun, faded, fragile, no longer capable of warming me. A soft knock at the door startled me. I hesitated, then went to check. Oliver. He wasn't dressed in last night's clothes anymore. He wore a clean jumper, hair still damp from the shower, holding 2 takeaway cups. "Good morning," he said quietly. "I didn't know if you'd want company, but I brought coffee just in case." I opened the door wider. "Come in." He stepped inside carefully, as though entering a recovery ward. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm upright. That's something." He offered a small smile. Being upright is highly underrated. We sat by the window again, the city slowly brightening below us. He handed me a cup. "Oat latte," I guessed. "You look like someone who'd choose the gentle option." I huffed a soft laugh. "Thank you. And you?" "Black coffee," he shrugged. "I feel like I need to keep my soul awake at the moment." We sipped in silence for a moment. Then Oliver's phone buzzed. He glanced down, grimaced, and turned the screen away. "Melissa?" I asked gently. "Yeah." He rubbed his forehead. "She wants to talk," which usually means she wants me to soften the blow she caused. I nodded slowly. "I understand that too well." He leaned back, breathing out through his nose. "Helen, do you think they understand what they've done? Truly understand it?" I thought for a long moment. "Honestly? No." I set my coffee down. "They understand times being caught asterisk. They understand embarrassment, guilt, consequences. But the actual wound? The betrayal? That's something only the betrayed feel. And that's what separates us from them." Oliver's jaw tightened. "You're right." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was shared. Then he asked something unexpected. "What are you going to do next?" A simple question. A terrifying one. "I don't know," I admitted. "I suppose start by returning home today. Not to fix anything. Just to reclaim what's left of my space." He nodded. "And after that?" I smiled faintly. "I might let life be quiet for a while. I think I've forgotten how to take up space without apologizing for it." Oliver looked at me in a way that made me feel seen. "Well," he said softly, "if you ever need a reminder of the space you deserve, I'm only a coffee away." Something warm flickered in my chest. Not romance. Not yet. But the recognition of a person who could understand my broken edges, because he carried his own. If you've ever rebuilt your life after betrayal, tell me. Asterisk, asterisk. What was the very first thing you did that made you feel like yourself again? Asterisk, asterisk. Your answer might help someone standing on the same shaky ground. After an hour, Oliver stood up. "I should give you time to get ready. I'll wait downstairs if you need a lift home." "You don't have to do that." He shrugged. "I know, but I want to." When the door closed behind him, I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For a moment, the room felt impossibly still. Then I showered, dressed in jeans and a soft jumper, packed my bag, and sat on the bed, staring at the door. I wasn't scared to face the house. Not anymore. I was simply preparing myself to walk into a past I no longer belonged to. When I finally went downstairs, Oliver was waiting in the lobby with his hands in his pockets. He gave me a small nod. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." The drive to my house was quiet, but not awkward. The kind of quiet born from mutual exhaustion and mutual understanding. My street looked exactly the same. Rows of terraced houses, rose bushes trimmed neatly, the faint smell of someone cooking bacon next door. But my home felt like a stranger. As we pulled up, Oliver said softly, "If you need anything, anything at all, I'm here." I turned to him, touched by the simplicity of the offer. "Thank you. Truly." He watched me walk to the door. I paused with my hand on the key, steadying my breath. The moment felt strangely monumental. Walking back into the life I'd left just hours ago, knowing it was no longer mine. Inside, the house was unbearably quiet. Andrew wasn't there. Thank God. But on the kitchen table, under a half-folded tea towel, was a note. Asterisk, asterisk. "Helen, I'm staying at Mark's tonight. I'll give you space. Please talk to me when you're ready. I love you." A. Asterisk, asterisk. I set the note aside. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt done. Utterly, completely done. I walked through each room, slowly, deliberately, touching surfaces, opening curtains, reclaiming space one breath at a time. And somewhere between the living room and the hallway, a quiet thought surfaced. Asterisk. This house is no longer my home, but I am finally my own. Asterisk. When I stepped outside again to take in fresh air, my phone buzzed. A message from Oliver. Asterisk, asterisk. Just checking. You okay? Asterisk, asterisk. I typed back. Asterisk, asterisk. I will be. Thank you. Asterisk, asterisk. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The weeks that followed the night at the Watermill passed in a strange, muted rhythm. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. Just a steady, quiet rearranging of my life, the kind that only happens after something breaks beyond repair. I didn't rebuild all at once. I began with the smallest, almost insignificant things no one would notice except me. Yet somehow, they became the foundations of everything that came after. I started with my wardrobe, folding old jumpers, brushing dust off dresses I hadn't worn in years, removing pieces that reminded me too much of dinners where Andrew complained, or gatherings where I smiled until my cheeks hurt just to keep the peace. I made space for myself on those shelves. A soft beige scarf I loved wearing on early winter mornings, a comfortable coat I'd bought at a Brighton market, a notebook from my brother that still smelled faintly of paper and nostalgia. Then I tackled the kitchen. I cooked meals I wanted, not the ones Andrew praised. I made soups from scratch, buttered toast the way I liked it, and filled the house with the quiet sound of a kettle instead of forced conversation. In the evenings, I opened windows and let the air move through the rooms, as if the house needed to breathe as much as I did. Mornings became gentler. I went for walks around the neighborhood, the kind of slow walks where you notice ivy climbing brick walls, or the smell of wet soil after rain. I bought tulips from the flower shop at the corner, placing a yellow bouquet in a glass vase on the dining table. It struck me how odd it was that I had never bought flowers for myself before. Why had I always waited for someone else to do it? One Thursday morning, rubbish bag in hand, I stepped outside and saw Andrew standing at the end of the path. He looked different. Unshaven, navy coat wrinkled, hair a mess, eyes tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. "Helen, can we talk?" His voice was small, almost unfamiliar. I didn't step back. I didn't step forward either. I simply stood. "Talking," I said quietly, "won't change what happened." "I know," he whispered. I want to apologize properly and understand." I looked at him for a long, still moment. The man I had married felt very far away. Not because he'd cheated, but because he was now forced to face parts of himself he'd avoided for years. We didn't go inside. We stood in the driveway, the smell of damp grass between us. "What do you think you understand, Andrew?" I asked. He swallowed. "That I lost you long before that night. Not because of the affair, but because I stopped seeing you. I thought you being there meant we were fine." His words didn't pierce me. They landed softly, like ashes from a fire already burnt out. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice cracking. "If there's any way to make this right." "There isn't," I replied gently. "And that's all right, truly." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he looked somehow older, as if he'd aged in the span of a month. "I dreamt you left," he said quietly. "But waking up and finding you actually gone, that was worse than the dream." "Leaving was hard," I said. "Staying would have been harder." He lowered his gaze, accepting the truth in my voice. When he walked away, I didn't feel triumph or sadness. I felt completion. A final page turned without bitterness. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. Asterisk. "If you'd like a walk at the weekend, I'm trying to learn how to escape my four walls. Asterisk. Oliver." I smiled and typed back. Asterisk. "So am I." Asterisk. We met in the park near the university where I taught. He brought warm pastries from a bakery he liked. I brought a small flask of tea. We didn't talk about Andrew. We didn't talk about Melissa. We didn't need to. Both of us were exhausted by the vocabulary of heartbreak. Instead, we spoke about small things. The grey skies the British seemed to collectively accept, the books he'd been reading, his long-forgotten dream of learning photography. I told him about my students, their messy essays, their brilliant lines, and my occasional daydream of running away to Scotland, to live beside a quiet lake. Oliver listened the way someone listens who isn't waiting to speak. We walked beneath bare branches, the early spring sun soft on our faces, our shadows stretching beside one another, without overlapping. At one point, he slowed, looked at me with a thoughtful expression, and asked, "Helen, do you think you're becoming yourself again?" I breathed in the crisp air before answering. "I think I am," I said, "not because of anything big, but because each morning I wake up and don't feel like I have to apologize for taking up space." He smiled gently, a smile that settled somewhere warm inside my chest. "You deserve that, more than you know." Later that evening, back at home, I placed the new tulips in their vase and noticed how the house didn't feel as heavy as before. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. Just a place, a temporary resting spot on my way back to myself. I wrote a list. Nothing profound, nothing dramatic. Just things I wanted to do in the coming month. Take a weekend photography class. Walk by the Thames alone. Reread my favorite childhood novel. Buy a new armchair to replace the one Andrew always said was too big. And allow myself to laugh whenever something was funny. Looking at the list, I realized none of it depended on anyone else. And strangely, that didn't feel lonely. It felt freeing. That night, before bed, I stood in front of the mirror. Not to inspect myself, not to check if the sadness had faded, but simply to see the woman standing there. A woman who hadn't collapsed. A woman who no longer feared abandonment. A woman rediscovering her own rhythm. I touched the mirror lightly. "It's taken me this long," I whispered, "to learn that losing someone can sometimes be the way back to yourself." I turned off the light. The house settled around me, calm and quiet. And somewhere deep in the soft, dark stillness, I felt my heart. Cracked, mending, but beating. Find a new pace. A quiet, steady peace. There comes a point in every recovery where the world feels different, not because it has changed, but because you finally have the courage to look at it without flinching. For me, that moment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I woke before my alarm, watched a soft beam of sunlight land on the bedroom wall, and realized something strange. I didn't feel dread, not the usual tightness in my chest, not the fear of what message might be waiting on my phone, not the pull of a life that felt too heavy for one person to carry. Just stillness, a gentle kind of quiet. I made tea, opened the window, and let the soft April air drift in. Birdsong carried faintly between the houses. Somewhere nearby, a neighbour's dog barked. Life went on, predictable, unhurried, entirely indifferent to my heartbreak. For the first time in months, I felt like I could step into that world without pretending. I spent the morning marking student essays at the dining table. Halfway through, I paused, realizing the subtle shift. For weeks, my mind had been a battlefield of memories and questions. But now, the noise had softened. The sharpness had dulled. Something inside me had begun to knit itself back together, in quiet, almost invisible ways. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Andrew. He didn't call anymore. He had finally learned to respect the distance. But he still sent messages. Today's was simple. Asterisk. I hope you're all right. I'm sorry about everything. Asterisk. I stared at the screen for a full minute, not with anger, not with longing, but with a strange, gentle understanding that our chapter had truly ended. I didn't reply. Some silences are not cruel. They are simply honest. Later that afternoon, I heard the letterbox clatter. A small envelope lay on the doormat. His handwriting, I almost laughed. Andrew, who hated writing anything by hand, resorting to letters because texts felt inadequate. I carried it to the table but didn't open it straight away. I made lunch, washed the dishes, folded laundry, and only then sat down with the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He apologized again. He talked about guilt, about losing himself, about going to counseling alone. He wrote that our house felt empty without me, that he finally understood the weight of what he'd destroyed. At the end, a line that must have cost him something to admit. Asterisk, I know your life will be happier without me. I'm trying to accept that. Asterisk. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer with the others, not to revisit, but to keep as a record of a chapter I no longer needed to carry. That evening, as the sun began to dip, I walked to the small cafe by the river. It had become something of a ritual, a place where I could sit alone without feeling lonely. I ordered chamomile tea and took a seat by the window. Outside, the water reflected streaks of pink and gold. A light breeze rippled across the surface, making everything shimmer. A few minutes later, someone slid into the chair opposite mine. Oliver. He set his coffee down, offered a soft smile. I thought I might find you here. I didn't ask how he knew. Some people just learn your rhythms without trying. Rough day? He asked gently. No, I said, surprising myself. Just a reflective one. He nodded, as though he understood exactly what that meant. We sat quietly for a while, watching the river. Beside me, Oliver felt neither intrusive nor distant, just steady, grounded, present in a way that didn't ask anything from me. Eventually, he spoke. I saw Melissa yesterday. My chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from the echo of old pain. How is she? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Lost. Or pretending to be. Hard to tell. He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly. She wants another chance. But it feels like she wants to restore her life more than she wants me. I'm sorry, I said quietly. It's strange, he continued. I spent years thinking she was the one person I couldn't live without. But now, when I picture my future, she isn't in it anymore. I looked at him, recognizing the truth of those words in myself. He smiled faintly. You're healing, Helen. I can see it. I feel it, I admitted. Slowly, quietly, but yes, something is shifting. We finished our drinks, then walked along the riverbank. The evening air was cool, carrying the distant sound of laughter from the high street. Lights flickered on in the houses lining the water, each one a small story unfolding behind closed curtains. We walked without hurry, our steps naturally aligned. You know, he said softly after a while, I don't think healing is about forgetting what happened. I think it's about remembering it without letting it shape every breath. I took in the words, letting them settle in the space between us. I'd like that, I said, to breathe without the weight. You will, he replied. Not all at once, but you will. When we reached the bridge, we paused. Cars crossed behind us, their headlights streaking across the road. Below, the river moved at its own pace, slow, unbothered, certain of its direction. Oliver leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets. I know we're both still mending, he said quietly, and I don't want anything rushed or undefined. But I enjoy being around you, Helen, more than I expected. More than I should, maybe. I felt warmth rise to my cheeks. A gentle, careful warmth. Nothing like the feverish uncertainty I once mistook for love. I enjoy being around you too, I said honestly. It feels safe and real. He smiled. Not wide, but sincere. The kind of smile that reaches the eyes. We'll take it slow, he said. No expectations, no pressure. Two people who've survived enough, walking at a comfortable pace. We resumed walking, shoulders occasionally brushing, a quiet reassurance rather than an invitation. When he drove me home later, I thanked him for the company. He didn't lean in for a kiss. He didn't linger awkwardly. He simply said, "Good night, Helen. Sleep well," and waited until I was safely through the door before driving off. Inside, the house felt warmer somehow. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. I placed my coat on the hook, lit a small candle on the table, and let the soft glow fill the room. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, the ticking of the hallway clock, the calm rhythm of my own breathing. It occurred to me then, the kind of realization that arrives gently, without trumpet or fanfare, that my life was no longer defined by betrayal. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself. And somehow, in the soft spaces between grief and renewal, in the simple act of walking beside someone who understood, the world had begun to open again. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but quietly, steadily, beautifully, just like healing always does. A year is an odd measure of time. Too long to hold your breath through grief, too short to forget the sound of a door closing on the life you once imagined. But it is long enough if you let it to become someone new. A year had passed since the night at the Watermill. A year since truth split open the world I thought was safe. A year since I walked into a hotel room with nothing but a suitcase and a heart held together by stubbornness alone. And now, standing at the edge of another spring, I barely recognized the woman I had been then. Not because she was weak. She wasn't. She survived things silently that would have broken louder people. But because she had lived too long in a house built on apologies she never received, and promises that were never honored. The woman standing here now had unlearned all that. She had learned how to breathe without shrinking, how to walk without tiptoeing around someone else's temper or absence, how to want things, small things, quiet things, hopeful things, without waiting for permission. It didn't happen suddenly. Healing rarely does. It came in small moments. The first night I slept through without waking from a memory. The afternoon, I laughed, really laughed, at something one of my students said, the day I looked in the mirror and saw myself. Instead of the woman, Andrew had eroded little by little. Even now, I remember the version of me who existed before all this, the one who carried her marriage like a fragile vase, terrified of dropping it, never realizing she wasn't the one causing the cracks. She was simply holding something already broken. I still think of her with tenderness, but I do not miss her, because somewhere along the way, in the gentle routine of rebuilding, I became someone else, someone I actually wanted to know. The photography course I joined on a whim had turned into a real passion. Most Saturdays, I walked along the towpath with my camera, capturing morning mist, dogs chasing sticks, boats swaying lazily against the current. There was something soothing about framing the world exactly as I chose to see it, something liberating about creating beauty instead of waiting for it. My flat once, a temporary stopgap, had gradually become home. The bookshelves were full again. The kitchen smelled of thyme, roasted tomatoes, and occasionally burnt toast when I got distracted. I painted the hallway a warm off-white, and bought the oversized armchair Andrew once said overwhelmed the room. It became my favorite place to read. Some evenings felt heavy still. Grief has a way of creeping in quietly, reminding you that endings leave shadows. But the heaviness no longer frightened me. It didn't feel like drowning. It felt like remembering. And right beside the heaviness was something else. Lightness, curiosity, the beginnings of joy. As for Andrew, his presence faded like the echo of a song you once knew by heart, but no longer wished to play. Every so often a message arrived, polite, distant, regretful. Words written by a man who finally understood the cost of his choices. I didn't wish him ill. I didn't wish him well either. He simply belonged to a life I had stepped out of, a story that no longer needed my voice. Forgiveness arrived quietly, not as a gift to him, but as a release for myself. And then there was Oliver. We didn't fall into anything swiftly. There were no declarations, no dramatic moments worthy of a love story. Only slow mornings, thoughtful conversations, walks along the river, and a gentle unfurling of trust between two people who had once been cracked open by the same kind of pain. He never pushed, never assumed, never placed expectations on what we were or weren't. Instead, he showed up, in long, steady patterns, the sort that make you exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. One evening, in early autumn, we met at the park after work. The leaves had begun to bronze, and the air carried that first hint of cold that makes you tug your sleeves a little tighter. We sat on a bench by the pond, watching ducks glide along the surface. After a while, he said quietly, "You're not the same woman I first met." There was no judgment in his voice, only admiration. "And who am I now?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Someone who walks with her chin higher, someone who knows what she deserves, someone who won't be dimmed by anyone again." I smiled, looking down at my hands that had once trembled in the bathroom, reading messages that weren't meant for me, hands that had held back tears, held on to hope, held on to a man who let go long before I did. Now they rested calmly in my lap. "I like her better," I said softly. "So do I," he replied. "We didn't start a relationship that night. We didn't need to. Sometimes companionship grows in the spaces where expectations don't exist." Winter passed with quiet certainty. We spent evenings cooking simple meals, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes saying nothing at all. I learned the rhythm of his thoughts, the way he paused before answering serious questions, the way his eyes softened when he listened. He learned the sound of my laughter, the one I had thought I'd lost. And somewhere, in the softness of those winter months, without ceremony or announcement, a new chapter began, not as a replacement for the old, but as something entirely separate, rooted not in fear or longing, but in clarity. By spring, I realized something important. The woman who once walked into a restaurant with a heart cracked wide open was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, not hardened, but rebuilt. Not unbreakable, but unwilling to shatter for anyone again. Someone who had learned that endings are not failures. They are openings, doorways, paths leading somewhere unexpected. Someone who understood that love should never require you to disappear. And someone who finally believed, quietly but fully, that she deserved a life shaped by choice, not compromise. A few days before the anniversary of everything, I walked along the river alone. Cherry blossoms drifted through the air like pale confetti, landing on the path at my feet. The water shimmered with the shifting light, slow and steady, a mirror of the person I had become. I paused on the bridge and leaned against the railing, listening to the soft lap of water below. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to pure peace, not because life was perfect, not because the past didn't matter, but because I had finally stepped into a future that belonged wholly, undeniably, to me. A quiet smile spread across my face, and I whispered into the gentle spring air, not as a declaration, not as a vow, but as a truth finally understood. I didn't just survive it. I became someone I'm proud of. And with that, I walked on, steady, certain, ready for whatever came next.